Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you today. I feel like I owe you a tag because yesterday's videos were all on their side. They were all vertical, and I have no idea why. I guess I'm going to have to check that every time I make videos, and I'm not very good at checking things ahead of time, so I apologize ahead of time if I make other videos like that. I know myself well enough to know that if I ever let BookTube become any kind of work, I'll just stop doing it. It's one of the reasons why I haven't really indulged in any kind of editing software, even though it'd be so convenient to put pictures of books right on the screen, because that will make it harder. That will make it work. And I know that if I do that, I'll just stop. And the same thing is true with elaborate preparation. Or elaborate technology of any kind. Is why I don't have a microphone or ring lights or anything like that. The closest that I've ever come is spending $4 on my little plastic tripod, and I couldn't live without it. It is just fantastic, but only because the situation that it replaced was so jury-rigged as to be ridiculous. But anyway, I felt like I owed you a tag, and Lord knows there are plenty of tags that I am loving just lately, just in the last couple of weeks, that I want to do. So I could do one of these every day. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll do one a day just to burn off the excess. But this one today is called the Ride or Die tag. Excuse me. Now, I'm not, in a lot of these tags, I'm not being scrupulous about whether or not I myself was personally tagged by name. I'm just doing them because I'm noticing a split in tag reactions on BookTube. A lot of people don't seem to want to be tagged. It's like the outer world reaching in and giving them one more responsibility when they're already feeling strained, when they're already feeling stressful. And then the other half of BookTube thinking, well, there's never been a greater time for tags. So once again, I don't know where you stand on that. I don't know. I don't feel quite comfortable tagging people by name when I'm doing tags. We'll get to the end when I get to the point where I'm supposed to tag people. But by the same token, I don't feel like I need to be tagged by name, and I wasn't in this one. This was created by LadetteM, and I'll leave a link to that channel. And it's just a series of apparently off-the-wall questions that I really like, except for the first couple. The first couple were theoretical trouble, and we'll see what we can do with them. Prompt number 1 is the BFF, a book not everyone loves, but that has been with you from the start. And as I've mentioned on this channel a few times before, there is no from the start for me. I started late as a reader. I was not reading as a child when all the rest of you were. And so I came late to reading, and therefore I came to reading in what was probably a fairly artificial way, so that my introduction to it really was the classics. And by the classics, I don't mean the usual BookTube usage of anything older than the viewer. I mean the classics of ancient Greece and Rome. So Homer's Iliad, for instance, has been with me from the start. And I guess this fits the question, because a lot of people, especially people who were born in the 21st century or thereabouts, the end of in the 90s, don't have any idea what they're missing when it comes to the classics of ancient Greece and Rome, so they haven't read them. And they don't have any idea that these things survive because they're alive. And that if you read them in the right way, the hands of the right translator, the right factual preparation, they'll change your life for the better. So maybe that does qualify. And question number 2 is Long Drive, a book ideal for long journeys. And I think what the question is probably angling for here is what kind of book is good for a long journey that you might not pick otherwise. But for me, it's not the length or nature of the book. It's whether or not the book is a category of book that I call an old friend. There are only a handful of them. I've read thousands and thousands and thousands of books. My old friends don't number any more than, conservatively speaking, 35. And if I have an old friend for company, then I don't care how long the book is, and I don't care how long the drive is. I'm fine. I'm just fine. Then question number 3 is The Newcomer, a recent read you can't stop talking about. Well, I'm not really talking about recent reads anymore. I wish I were. I'm not talking about it as much as I wish I could. I email friends of mine who are in the book reviewing world and whatnot, and authors and whatnot, but I could deal with a lot more of that, I guess is what I'm saying. But as an invitation to mention a few new books, I can certainly do that. Like, for instance, one that we've seen on this channel before, The Brothers York by Thomas Penn, the author of Winter King, which is a study of the York side of York versus Lancaster, and that I think inevitably has Richard III, the future Richard III, as a sort of standout character. But The Brothers York is really, really good. It's twice as long as Winter King, and really, really good. But also, When You Wish Upon a Rogue, by Anna Bennett. It's part of her Debutante Diaries series. It's a romance novel. It's really, really good. And Execution by S.J. Paris, which is the next book in the series of murder mysteries featuring Giordano Bruno. Execution is the next one of those books. There's also a new John Connolly, Charlie Parker book that's coming out that I haven't got my hands on at all. But I could go, I mean, a recent read you can't stop talking about, I could go on at great length on a number of books. Then question number 4 is The Quiet One, a book you reach for when you need some peace and quiet. And I'm not trying to be contrary with these questions, but this one misfires too, because I don't look to books for peace and quiet. I go elsewhere for peace and quiet. My relationship with books is contentious. And if they're doing it right, and if I'm doing it right, then it's contentious. And except if it's an old favorite of mine, and even that's not peace and quiet. That's something else. That's some sort of inner confirmation, but it's not peaceful, and it's generally not quiet. But most of the reading that I do, 95% of the reading that I do, is books that aren't old favorites, and there the relationship is contention. It's argument. It's stimulation. It works me up. It doesn't calm me down. I go elsewhere for that. I go outside with dogs for that. Then question number 5 is just a stumper. It was The Outgoing One, a book ideal for those antisocial occasions. In this case, I can't even figure out really what the question is asking, even to people who do have answers for it. I just don't know what it means. Antisocial occasions would mean what? What do you read when you're skipping a party? Well, it would be your book. You're reading whatever your book is. Right? Or no, I don't have any antisocial occasions. I wish I had more social occasions. This is, it has been pointed out jokingly on social media for the last 2 months. People on Twitter and Instagram have been urging other introverts to check on the extroverts that you know, because they're having it really hard. Well, yes, not only am I an extrovert, but my dog is also an extrovert. And we can't hug people anymore. We can't approach people anymore. We can't stand and chat with people anymore. It's not easy. So I don't know. I've never viewed reading as antisocial, but I've never been one to go to parties or anything, or gatherings or author talks or signings or anything like that, because I've always thought that time could be better spent reading. But if such things are ever allowed again, I might make a few exceptions and just go out just to be out and about among people. Then prompt number 6 is guilty pleasures. What is it? What is a guilty pleasure read? And at first I was going to say the standard response among some booktubers, like for instance you heard it on Brian at Bookish when he did this tag. He for some reason rushed through this tag. I don't know why you would rush through anything on BookTube, but he said that he's past the point where he feels like anything is a guilty pleasure, where he actually feels guilty about reading something. And partly my answer is that as well. Of course, I don't mean it in a literal sense that it's a guilty pleasure. I view guilty pleasure as a descriptor more as referring to stuff that doesn't require all of your attention, all of your engagement. Like, for instance, if I were reading The Brothers York, when I was reading that book, I was reading it with a pencil in hand. I was reading it with my mind actively engaged with all sorts of other York and Lancaster biographies that I have read. It was a serious reading experience, still enjoyable, enormously enjoyable, but with all pistons firing. Whereas I think of guilty pleasures as something where that is not true, where you're basically lounging in a bath with the book is the bath. And at first I thought I had only one of those, which is old style Regency romances. These old style Signet Regency romances, which I just love. I love them to death, but there's no way to call them serious reading. They're very corseted by their genre specifications. They are very, very predictable. It's a very, very narrow form, like an Elizabethan sonnet, and you just have to appreciate the small variations that each author does on that very limited form. At first I was going to answer this question by saying that I only had that one guilty pleasure, but then a whole bunch more came to mind. I made a whole list. Old-time Regency romances, Star Trek novels, which are entirely based on an intellectual property that is in a different kind of art completely, a visual medium. and that visual medium carries a lot of the weight of the book, right? I've never read a Star Trek novel. I've read a huge number of Star Trek novels, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, but I've never read a Star Trek novel that made any sense of Star Trek, or that even thought to. It's just assumed in a Star Trek novel that you know the whole background, or most of it, enough to make sense of it. I've never had a Star Trek novel explain what anything is. so that would definitely count as a guilty pleasure. Also comic books and comic book novels. I've read a lot of those, and they're the same way. Cowboy romances. Do I have a cowboy romance within reach? Yes, I do. Tall, dark cowboy Christmas. Which I sort of read with... oh, here's another one. This cover's slightly better. I read cowboy romances with a slight bit of impatience until I started hearing them enthusiastically recommended on Steeped in Books. Sarah at Steeped in Books has a fondness for cowboys, and that's when I started thinking, oh well, all right, she's a serious reader. If she can like these things so much, maybe there's a wavelength I'm missing here. And when I found it good and proper. Also, Wattpad stories from the website Wattpad, which is all about amateur generated fiction. Although I had been away from Wattpad for a while. I used to love it in its earliest days, and then I came back to it. Boy, oh boy, has it got professional! It's amazing. But if you dig around, you can find all kinds of things on Wattpad, and I have a soft spot for that. Even though these things are not vetted, most of them are not edited, most of them are not rewritten or heavily revised, so it can be viewed as a guilty pleasure because there's plenty of revisited and revised and edited stuff that I haven't read that I could be reading instead. Also, same thing is true with fanfiction.net, where I've spent a lot of time reading on fanfiction.net, even though those stories are campfire stories. Basically, they have no artistic merit and no structure to them at all, with a tiny few exceptions. There are tiny few exceptions that are actually well written. Then the Black Dagger Brotherhood by J.R. Ward. It's a long series of novels about sexy vampires that they have no redeeming qualities whatsoever. But that's the nature of guilty pleasures, is that when you're reading the thing, that what the thing you're reading is a guilty pleasure if there's a lot you could be reading that's a lot better. That's all. You don't actually have to feel guilty about it, but that's what a guilty pleasure is, and the Black Dagger Brotherhood certainly applies. And also the last one I have here is decorative classics. Classics of the canon, maybe things that I've read many, many, many times that I only got and am only rereading because the new format that I found them in is pretty. That's also a bit of a guilty pleasure when you could be doing a lot more with your time than that. So I was surprised when I got to this prompt how many guilty pleasures started flooding to mind. So I jotted down some of them. Then let's see here. Number 7 is The Stranger, a book no one seems to have heard of, but that you love. And I picked a book that people have heard of, scholars have heard of it, and back when it was written, everyone had heard of it. No one reads it anymore, but I really like it. It's the Enchiridion, Militus Christiani, by the Dutch humanist Erasmus. It's the handbook of a Christian prince, a Christian knight. And it's a book of precepts about Christian living that I really like. I really, really like it. I think it's one of the best things that Erasmus ever wrote. And he wrote a lot of stuff. He wrote his whole life long. But the Enchiridion has a special place in my heart. I really, really enjoy it. I wish, like crazy, that somebody would write an enormously long and loving and historically literate new introduction to the Enchiridion, and then do a really, really good new translation, a translation that actually manages to capture Erasmus's voice, which so many of his translations fail to do, even though it was the number one thing about his works that all the people in his day, when he was the world's foremost literary figure, loved the most. It was the thing that his readers loved the most, was his voice. Not his arguments, not his beautiful Latin, not anything like that, but just his voice. And yet that voice is conspicuously missing from most of Erasmus translations. What I wouldn't give if somebody would do a new edition of the Enchiridion, just a slim volume on its own. Oh, that would be great. So I'm not saying that no one's ever heard of it, but it's certainly not tripping off people's tongues right now. Even Christians. Even Christians usually don't know this work. And it's a fine, eloquent, compassionate evocation of their own lifestyle, their own ethos. So Then prompt number 8 is the book was better. We're heading into well-trod ground on this channel. An adaptation that was uh, inferior to its novel, where the novel was better, the book was better. And as you know, if you've watched this channel, I don't think that ever happens, or almost never happens. It virtually never does happen. When I was thinking about examples for this question, I was thinking about the reverse. I was thinking about all the movies, the movie adaptations of literary works that are better than the literary works they adapt. And that list is endless, just endless, long enough to substantiate my claim that the adaptation is pretty much always better. So I got a little rogue. I didn't actually make a list of books that are better than their movie adaptations. There are some that are. There are some that are. Anna Karenina stands safely beyond the reach of its adaptations. For instance, The Age of Innocence has been adapted, and it's handily better than Wings of the Dove. These things are handily better than Last of the Mohicans. But the list of books, of movies that are better than the books they're based on, I just did a partial one here, just off the top of my head. Any version of Ben-Hur, Field of Dreams, Remains of the Day, any version of War of the Worlds. A Christmas Carol, of course, I'm thinking of the Muppet version. I don't know what version you're thinking of, but if you're not thinking of the Muppet version, you're thinking of the wrong version. Either version of Lord of the Flies. The Joan Hickson version of Miss Marple. Good Lord, watching a Joan Hickson Miss Marple TV adaptation is infinitely more enjoyable than reading Agatha Christie's novels. Any Harry Potter, any Jason Bourne, any James Bond. The movie versions of any of those things are better than the written versions. Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. I might also add any other Michael Crichton book. They've all been adapted. East of the Dead, unbearable as a reading experience. The 13th Warrior is brilliant. A brilliant movie. The Andromeda Strain, Sphere. Almost all of them are better than the books that they're drawn from. To Kill a Mockingbird. Heresy, I know. But are you actually going to tell me that you prefer the book to the movie? Even though the movie is only a partial adaptation of the book? What about A Horseman on the Roof? For those of you who like your European literature. Movie's 10 times more bearable than the book. A Clockwork Orange, Anthony Burgess' signature novel. The movie's brilliant. The novel is most certainly not. The English Patient, The Firm, The Godfather. The Godfather as a book? That list just kept going and going and going. So to do honor to this tag, I should probably make a separate video where I just talk about books that are superior to their movies. Maybe I should do that, just to be fair. But this prompt, the book was better, just the answers just flew out of me, and they were all in the opposite direction. And then the last prompt is number 9, the author. An author who you would read anything that they write. And in most cases, the answer here will be, I suspect that most of you will answer this in terms of just plain personal preference. And I would too, but in my case, there's a little added element extra, which is that I read even authors that I don't like, even authors where I haven't liked their last 6 books. I will still read them because I'm a book critic, and I can't feel comfortable knowing that there's a new fill-in-the-blank novel, a new Haruki Murakami novel. I can't feel comfortable knowing that there's a new novel by Ian McEwan that I haven't read, if you know what I mean. It feels like a betrayal. It feels like being unprofessional. Because the time may come when I have to review it, and also because as a critic of the current literature of the day, I don't read anywhere near as much backlist as I used to. I'm mostly a creature of new releases, of new books in any given year. 2020 is going to be a distinct challenge when it comes to that, but I'm still going to do it. And so I feel like I have to read, like I would never miss a book by a whole bunch of authors, a large assembly of authors where when they have a new book, like Jonathan Franzen, I can't stand his novels, but I can't miss one. Jonathan Safran Foer, all sorts of other people, all sorts of, even the bandwagon authors like Rachel Cusker, Sally Rooney. I have to pay attention to them now, forever. For the whole of their career, I have to do that. And that's not often a pleasant experience, but I made a whole list of names, also gushed forth for this one as well, of names of authors where I will read everything they write. Marilyn Robinson I listed, William Volman, Meg Wolitzer, Colson Whitehead, Adam Tooze, the historian, Elizabeth Gilbert, Zadie Smith, Richard Powers, Sarah Perry, Max Porter, George Saunders, Arundhati Roy, Salman Rushdie, Elif Shafak, Haruki Murakami, Sarah Waters, David Mitchell, Joshua Ferris, and I could go on. There's probably 20 more names of people that I can't in good conscience skip them. This is the list that I just jotted down off the top of my head is mostly fiction. For instance, there's an equally long list for nonfiction, working historians, working biographers who I won't miss, for a combination of personal and professional reasons. So I don't know that I even want to try and price out which is which. But anyway, that is it. That is the ride or die tag. The only item left is tagging people. Whom do you tag? And again, I don't know who's comfortable doing tags or not. I don't want somebody to think, well, Steve tagged me and I don't feel like doing tags, so what do? I know, I should, I'm not all that. If I tag somebody by name and they don't feel like doing it, they can just not do it. It's no big deal. But even so, until I get a little more comfortable, maybe tomorrow's tag, I'll be a little more comfortable and I think it out a little. But in the meantime, I do want everybody to do this who hasn't done it already. I'm not also sure this tag has made a little bit of progress around our little corner of BookTube. So I'm not sure who's done it and who hasn't. So if you hear these things and you want to do this tag, by all means do it. I want to hear your answers. Especially, of course, to that one about the book was better. We could have a long discussion on that alone. And maybe we will. Maybe I should do that. But in the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up and go for a long stroll with a tiny little 10-pound ball of lint. My Hanoverian warrior princess is... Come here. Come up here. Come up and see your fans. Come here. Come here. Come up here. Come here. Here we go. Oh. She's feeling a little restive, aren't you? You want to go out and scream at people, don't you? Her ears and the top of her head are a little better defined than usual because we had a clipping. And that was a disaster, wasn't it? She squirms. She does the worst possible thing. I keep telling her in the midst of our clipping that if she just stands still, it'd be over in 2 seconds. She wouldn't feel a thing. But instead, she squirms and pivots. She does the thing that is most likely to get an ear lopped off. Hasn't happened yet, though, has it? You look so pretty. You do. You look so pretty. We're going to go for a walk. Yes, we are. And we're going to have people shun us. Humans don't want to come anywhere near other humans. And a distressing number of people that I have met in the last 2 weeks out on dog walks seem to be under the impression that dogs can contract and convey COVID-19. They can't. I've read stories from the news from around the world of people killing their pets because they think that they're somehow filthy or contaminated with a virus that they cannot contract. And there's no telling people either. I mean, you come across some sanctimonious newsmonger on your walk. You want to tell them. I want to tell people, I'm sorry, you're shunning her for no good reason because she can't infect you, of course. But I've stopped doing that because I can, and they can infect me. So it's better that it not happen. The extrovert in me will just have to cry in silence. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to go out and tramp around in the wilderness. I figure 2 hours of videos from me in one day is enough. So I'm gonna wrap this up, but I'll be back tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.